This little plastic add-on is basically a cable management tool. It is designed to assemble the Nintendo Switch dock and a Gamecube to USB adapter into a single object, without compromising on any feature. You just slip the adapter in it and then the Switch dock. It's a straightforward and inexpensive solution to combine the two objects. In a way, it's a dock for the Switch dock. The result is one single object, slightly taller than the Switch dock, with direct access to the Gamecube ports. The USB ports on the side are still accessible, and the back door can still open. Even better, it doesn't compromise the faceplate of the Switch dock. If you got a limited edition, its looks won't be spoiled by this add-on. Everything is designed to snap in place. The original dock is locked in all directions, left, right, front, and back, and, to a lesser extent, up. The Gamecube adapter is guided and locked by little bumps that fit tightly in the recesses for the screws. All directions of movement are blocked, and there is no slack. The Gamecube ports will always be in front of the cutouts. And since this is just a piece of plastic, you won't have to worry about it bricking your Switch, nor to stop working with future updates. This was designed with 3D printing in mind. It prints in one piece, no assembly is required. You can print it and use it straight away. It's important to note that in this video, one of these prints will be sanded and painted for slightly better looks. This is the one you see on the right, here. If you want to get this, there are two ways. You can print it by yourself on your home, school, or work printer. You'll find a link to the 3D model files in the description. Or if you don't have access to any printer, you can order one already printed with the other link in the description. This option is there because with past projects, a few people asked for help in 3D printing parts from some of these videos. But if you can, try to print it yourself. There will be less money thrown away in expensive shipping. Just note that, this time, the 3D files won't be free. A lot of time and effort went into them, so they'll have a symbolic price under $2 to cover for that. This was designed for the official Nintendo adapter for the Switch or Wii U. Another version was also designed for the Mayflash brand adapter. The model is quite different, less tall and much deeper, but thankfully most of the design can be reused. In this video, we'll go through the design process, information on how to print it yourself, and finally, sanding and painting one of these prints if you're looking for the best possible result. As usual, you will find timecodes in the description to skip or to rewatch parts of this video. The design of this object is guided by its purpose, which is to hold the Switch dock and an official adapter in one place, in the minimum amount of space possible. But it cannot impair the normal function of the dock. It must not touch the Switch itself. All the ports must be accessible. The door at the back must be accessible and should be able to open. The LED must be visible. And the same thing for the logos. For this object to serve its purpose, it has to be stable, have a big base. Also, you don't want the Switch dock or the adapter to move around while you're grabbing the whole thing, or if you were to tug on your controller cable. As said before, bits of plastic need to be placed to prevent any of the parts from falling off and to block movement in most directions. The idea is to play with tolerances, which need accurate measurements. The most important part of designing this project was getting the measurements right. For that, a simple desktop scanner was used to get the initial shape and size of the components. It turned out to be quite a powerful tool. Most of the measurements were almost right in the first try. With 3D printing, you can easily print a prototype and adjust measurements from there. It's very easy to get a real-world test. This particular item went through 6 draft revisions before being finalized. The aesthetics mostly revolve around sharp angles, with the exception of the round edges on the bottom that call back to the shape of the Switch dock. Let's quickly go through the process of designing the 3D model. The bottom is a simple extrusion, as wide as the Switch dock and as deep as the Gamecube controller adapter. The space for the adapter is carved in it, with a big fillet to fit the rounded shape. Then, little protrusions were extruded to lock the adapter in place. After that, the parts that lock in the Switch dock are added. Here, the wall delimiting the back of the Switch dock is purposely kept very low. It is even modeled into a slope. This allows the door at the back to be opened all the way. The first arm is then modeled with inward protrusions to lock in the switch dock. Since this will be 3D printed, these protrusions can't just dangle in mid-air. A chamfer at the bottom circumvents that. Without it, the print would fail. These must be thin enough to not touch the switch in docked mode. Luckily, there's enough room for that. A triangular shape is added to the arms. This gives it much more rigidity without compromising looks. With this shape, this item looks a bit less wide than it actually is. Then, decorative chamfers are added to the whole arm. These had to be defined one at a time by hand. The automatic feature couldn't handle the variable angle. Finally, the other arm is added with a simple symmetry. A little wall was added in the front for aesthetic reasons. The left arm gets cut down a bit to leave access to the cable management hole in the switch dock. On the right arm, holes are cut to give access to the USB ports. The thickness of the arm is locally reduced. This is a compromise to keep some of the arm's rigidity while enabling a plug to be inserted. A bigger hole may fragilize the whole arm, which is already the weakest part of this model. The slit to feed the adapter cable is added, with chamfers to respect the design of the whole unit. The remaining dead space can be dedicated to cable management. Cavities are extruded towards the back. The Gamecube adapter cable will be crammed into those. The angled roof makes it possible to print these without supports, making use of bridging. After that, a few decorative chamfers are added, and the model is ready for a test print. It's been designed with FDM 3D printing in mind. It should print fine without any supports. This is a relatively easy item to print. It has a big base and is quite sturdy. The only possible concern is its large size. If you have access to a printer big enough, and most of them are nowadays, at your job or school, you should give this a try, as it's not too hard to print. Even if you don't know much about 3D printing, you can follow these tips and instructions and you'll most likely be fine. These were printed on a Creality Ender 3. If you have one of these, you could just use these parameters. These are printed at 0.2mm layer height. You could go as low as 0.1mm, but the difference is slight on an object this large. As said before, no need for supports thanks to the design, and no need for a brim or raft given the large surface area in contact with the bed. However, cooling is very important, if available. It will help during the bridging of large gaps in the model. This object can be printed at high speeds, but lower speeds like 40 to 80 mm per second will result in less artifacts on the surface. This print needs to be strong. For that, you should at least do 3 perimeters with a 0.4mm nozzle. That means 1.2mm walls. And for the top and bottom, use at least 1mm. For the same reason, an infill of at least 30% is nice to have. After quite a few hours, the print is done. If the retraction on your printer is good enough, you should be able to use this object right away. No post-processing needed. The print on this Ender 3 is satisfying. However, the surface has a few bumps and irregularities. There are ways to attenuate this in printing, but for the purposes of this video, let's instead explore the post-processing of a PLA print like this. Just for this one print, let's take the time to sand away all the irregularities and paint it for a smooth finish. Sanding a 3D printed object can give great results, but it's really tedious. PLA is really tough to sand, it's pretty resilient, and it also melts very easily, which means that you can't really use a mechanical sander. It's safer to do it all by hand. You don't have to worry about using a high grit sandpaper because the paint will be used to fill in the minor scratches. We don't want to ruin the aesthetic of the sharp edges. Sanding tends to round corners. To avoid that, a scrap piece of flat plastic can be used as a guide for the sandpaper. Keeping it level helps sanding the surfaces in a flat and even way. This model is a hard one to sand due to its design. Other than the sharp edges to preserve, it has many tiny corners and inaccessible areas. In addition to that, the big chamfers are rounded inward, giving very little room to move and apply strength. Sanding these parts will be a slow grind. To make it all easier on the hands, tools can be used to guide the sandpaper to unreachable areas. After trying a few DIY prongs and sticks, this model was found online. Again, 3D printing proves itself useful by giving us tools far better designed than the makeshift ones. With these, it's much easier to finish the corners and also the inward slopes. Even though it isn't necessary, using a layer of Bondo will considerably speed up this whole process. Bondo must be applied in thin layers to save time on sanding. It sands better than PLA, it will make it all less tiring. Another advantage is that the contrast of the white Bondo on the black plastic helps us clearly see what needs additional sanding and what's done. After all this sanding, a bit of water sanding will help in removing the remaining cracks before painting. Let's do a first coat of paint. It will plainly show what parts of the object aren't fully flat. The first coat must be pretty thin. It will also help in filling the remaining gaps. Looking at this first result, we can definitely detect many lines and scratches, but there are no big problems. Thus, by making use of the thickness of the paint and with a little more water sanding, we should get to the desired result pretty quickly. Don't forget to clean the plastic before painting it with regular soap. After this final smoothing, we can apply a second and hopefully final coat. A week later, the model is dried fully and we can inspect it for issues. The print lines have completely disappeared. All the surfaces are satisfyingly smooth. The object looks much cleaner. There are small imperfections here and there. Those are mostly because of the lackluster spraying technique. Still, the dock looks great like this. The result makes it worth the effort. Let's try it out. The switch can be inserted the normal way. This doesn't impair on anything, with or without Joy-Cons attached. Actually, it looks good in both cases. By the way, to keep the look as clean as possible, you can use these 90-degree USB adapters on the side USB ports. It will look more discreet than the two plugs sticking right out. These really add the final touch to the whole design. If you order one of these docks already printed, you can ask to have these adapters also. Once again, this paint finish is definitely unnecessary. The object looks good 3D printed. This is only a one-time thing to make this one even more special. The final point of this video is to encourage you to try and 3D print this. If you've never tried to print anything, this is a good first one. However, don't ask for a company to print this for you, it will probably be too expensive to be worth it. You're also encouraged to try new colors or even multicolor versions of this object. It's a bit minimalist in design. The black color is there to be the least distracting one possible. But this object could definitely benefit from an inspired paint job, or a dual color print. Maybe something to go along with a special edition switch dock. Thanks for watching this video. Consider subscribing if you want more, and share this to your friends if you liked the video. All the links to get this item are in the description.